Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. Michael Perry. But before we get into the conversation itself, I'm just going to give Dr. Perry the opportunity to share with us just a little bit about himself before we get into the conversation. Dr. Perry, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Dr. Richard Cross, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you having me here. It's my honor to be here with you. So my name, Mike Perry. I'll say the doctor thing for all the formalities, but my friends and family and most people call me Mike. But I actually live in the Augusta, Georgia area right now, Evans, Georgia to be exact. I'm married to my wife, Wendy, for about 25 years coming up this year. We have two daughters, 20 and 22 years old. And so I think being a family man is one of my greatest gifts and highest priorities. I'm also retired Army. My wife and I served in the Army for just over 22 years, and I retired around 2016. And since then, I've been running my business, Catalyst Executive Advising and Development. We shortened that to Catalyst because we learned the lesson of International House of Pancakes, of having too many words in the name of your business. So we run Catalyst, and Catalyst is really about changing things, changing culture, changing the way people lead and relate to each other, and creating a place that people want to work. So that's what we do currently. I also do what my wife calls our virtual marriage ministry. We do a show called The Marriage Shop on Facebook and YouTube once a week, 7 o'clock on Mondays. Really trying to help people to create the marriage that they really want to have, the one they dreamed of, and frankly, the one that many of us didn't see growing up. And so we're trying to rewrite the story and the narrative around marriage. And I think the last biggest thing that's important to know is that I'm also leading an initiative, a movement, you might call it, that we've dubbed Unity. And it's just about bringing people together into the same spaces who wouldn't necessarily be there, and helping them to understand the things that they share and using that as a basis to then grow together and change the things that need to be changed. So that's just a little bit about me.
Okay, thanks for sharing, and I appreciate the time you spent, especially in the Army serving, because the service is really important, and something that as civilians we have to appreciate just in our community, just the sacrifice you have made to make sure things are going well. So I know we're going to be talking more about your experience itself throughout the questions. So, but I'm just going to go straight into the questions to start off the conversation. So the first question I want to ask you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
I think the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact is the idea is that it's not over. Whenever you're trying to do anything that makes a difference, there's going to be resistance. There may even be failure at times. And so, what do you do, right? I think it's important to just have the mindset it's never over. You can't stop, because in order to have true impact, lasting impact, that's going to take time to develop. You have to let things take the time that they take. And so I just think I always tell people, it's not over. Never stop, and you'll have impact.
Okay, so it's basically those who can stay committed long enough to make the impact. So,
Yeah, no question. And I said, yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think it is about those who are still standing, when the battle is over, who's still standing.
that's important, because to make an impact, sometimes it's not going to be easy or within the time frame that we set out to make the impact that we want to make. But just to bear that in mind and be willing to make the commitment to go as long as it takes to make the impact that we want. So I think that perspective is really important and a great reminder to those who want to see change or positive change within our community. So
Sure.
also, I will ask you this: what advice do you have for the men listening on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
I think the most important thing regarding that question is the idea that relationships are critical. It's very easy to get out on an island and feel like, hey, I have to do it all. It's about my talent. It's about my gifts and all that. Well, that's true in part, but your question is important because you said having a role in creating positive impact, right? We all have a role, and for that role to be effective, I have to somehow connect my role to yours and yours to someone else's, and all of a sudden now, I mean, this is kind of the essence of what teamwork is, right? We're not trying to do the entire thing, and I'll try to limit my sports analogies, right? But if we're on a team, we're not supposed to play every position,
Yeah.
right? We're supposed to be the expert. We're supposed to be the best we can be our position. And so who you partner with and choose to partner with is critical. But I think that's probably the most important thing is to find out who is going to be that partner, who those partners are going to be that are going to help you to achieve whatever impact you're trying to achieve.
So you're saying that the best advice is to choose the relationships carefully when you're thinking about the impact that you want to make or the change you want to make, because that can be critical. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes those are not things that we sometimes really think deeply about when it comes to creating positive change, because we sometimes don't realize that the role that we play, or how others can enhance that role, and not, as you mentioned, not to be playing all the different roles in creating change, but how what others can complement what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's right, Richard. And I would say just one point of clarity because you said choose those relationships carefully, and I'd agree with that. But I'd even say just be in this mindset that it's going to require relationships, and that
Mhm.
you can't do it alone. I mentioned that unity movement that we're doing. You know, I know my role clearly in that is to be someone who creates space, right? Create the space and the opportunity and a method for people to connect in the same place. Well, it's somebody else's role to now take that because people want to do, they want to meet more, they want to do small groups and they want to do projects, and that's fine. But that's somebody else's role, right? I can't overextend and step outside of what I know my role and purpose to be. And so I'm seeking relationships in order to make those type things happen.
Man, that's important. So that's where collaboration comes in. You have this idea to do something great, but it's okay to have others to do other parts other than what you can do yourself. So that's great, and it's a great reminder when we're thinking about creating positive change, because we're not able to do everything. And that
Right.
shouldn't even be the focus, but to get others who can complement what we're trying to accomplish. So, how can we as Black men help to change the narrative today?
Well, it depends on what narrative you're listening to, right? If it's the negative, if it's the negative narrative, then I would simply say don't listen to it. We have to tell our own stories, write our own stories. I think it's important for us first individually. You have to find yourself,
Yeah.
and we don't even have time to talk about maybe what that really means and how you do it, but you have to somehow discover who you are. Then you have to find your tribe because if you know who you are, you'll know who your tribe is and they'll know you, they'll recognize you. Then you have to find your voice. Finding that tribe creates a place for safety and feedback and support, right? So you find your voice, then you share your story. Because if you found yourself, you found your tribe, you found your voice, then you have that foundation that you need in order to be able to effectively share your story and to recognize that whatever your story is, it's something that once you own it, nobody can use it against you. It's a place of power. It's a place of what's a place of impact, right? And so I think it's really important to be able to establish that foundation that allows you to write the narrative yourself.
Okay. And I appreciate that perspective. But let me ask this: if you find your voice and you know what you're about, but yet you still have to deal with the oppositions and the resistance when you decide that this is what I want to do. This is the impact that I want to make. As you mentioned, don't focus on the negative parts of our story, but you may be in spaces where you have to deal with those oppositions. How would you deal with the opposition?
I think that if you're doing anything meaningful, anything different, anything risky, anything that's going to make some real change, you're going to deal with opposition. And so I would say expect it and in some ways embrace it. And that's hard to do, but recognize opposition, it just makes us better. It makes us stronger. And that's kind of a universal concept, right? You don't get movement without resistance. You don't get growth without resistance. And so I think the opposition is just going to be there. It's always going to be there. And so, I want people to, sometimes we take that as people fighting against us. We will take opposition personally. It's not personal. If it wasn't you, it'd be somebody else. So it's a matter of just expecting it, knowing what you're about, and staying the course. And more times than not, you'll win. And it doesn't mean that you will quote unquote win every time, whatever that means. But what it does mean is over time, you will have shifted something. Something will be different because you showed up.
And I really appreciate you sharing that point of view in regards to expect the resistance, especially when you're trying to do something great, and don't take it personal, because sometimes that may happen where we take what's happening around us, the resistance, the opposition, personal, not
Yeah.
realizing it's because you're trying to do something that's different, and everybody will not be willing to accept the change that you bring to that space. Just to accept it, continue focusing on what you want to accomplish and stand firm on your truth from just listening to what you said, because I think that at times it's important as a great reminder not to let the resistance stop us from doing the work when we're
Yes.
thinking about creating change. So I really appreciate that perspective. What or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on? I know you spent 25 years in the military, and
Mhm.
now you're out and doing other important work. But you can start off at the beginning where you went in and served to present day. Was there anyone or a situation that inspired you?
Yeah, I think I would even go back to the early days where my parents really kind of inspired me. I think my dad, he was all about taking care of people. Some of that, hard worker. He was a manager at the telephone company. He was an army veteran himself. Hard worker. That's where I kind of learned this work ethic of just like don't quit. Like he taught me how to try things, or showed me that it was you could try things, you could break them. Somebody will fix it if you can't, but give it a try. My mother, one of the most important things she ever told me when I was a teenager was I was kind of sweating what I was going to do when I grew up, and that was the era of the black male is the endangered species and all that. And she said, "Don't chase money." She said, "Money won't satisfy you. Figure out what you're supposed to do and do that, and the money will find you." I didn't really understand exactly how I was gonna do that, but I think that was really important, and it stuck with me my whole life. Another really impactful person in my life, inspirational person, one of my battalion commander when I was in the Army. I was a commander down in San Antonio, Colonel Brian Allgood. He was a surgeon, but he was also the battalion commander for the unit I worked for, and I was one of his company commanders. He hired me having no experience, no resume. I didn't know anybody when I got to that base. And he says I begged him for a job. Maybe I did, wrote him letters, all that stuff. But I watched him really take care of people, at a very individual human level. He'd be in his office examining folks who were in our unit, giving them advice whether they need to go and get more care or not. He let me debate and battle and scream and holler and all that. And but he showed me kind of what it was to really take care of people while holding them to a high standard. He actually passed. He was in a helicopter that was shot down
Yeah.
back in Afghanistan. I think we all suffered a tremendous loss, but I think what he left was a legacy of really, really taking the time it took to take care of people. And two other people, I won't drag it out, but I think it's important to mention Dr. Neil Grunberg. He was my mentor during grad school. I didn't like him very much initially because he was one of the most demanding professors in the department, but I soon knew that he needed to be my mentor and my advisor because I knew he'd always tell me the truth and he would see the bigger picture outside of just this degree, but how are we going to do something that help to change the human condition? And finally, my wife supports me in all kind of craziness that I think of, and she's right there. And as a lot of people have seen, we work side by side. Not always easy, but I think we're both better for it. So that's just a little bit of my inspiration.
which propelled you to be the person that you are today. And the people that serve as those inspiration and really help to develop us from you being in college to in the military to your life right now with your wife
Mhm.
and stuff like that. Those people that are there really serve as a part of how we become the person we are today. Because everyone has different individuals who inspire them and influence them to go on the path that they're on and help them to realize the importance of their work and even setting standard, as you mentioned, for the professor that you didn't really like that much, but held you to a higher standard because they see a bigger picture. And at times, that's what we need when we are on our journey to realize even our own potential. Those individuals that really challenge us to be all that we can be. As you mentioned, your hard work and discipline came from, your father, being that he was also a part of the military. So, what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
It's kind of a mixed bag. It's a great story, and in some pockets, it's a tragic story where we still experience the residue of systemic factors, systemic racism, and how the disparities in law enforcement, health, and healthcare. I mean, there's a lot of things that have some deep roots in terms of what it's impacting Black men. However, I look at what we're doing. I look at what you're doing. I look at people like John Hope Bryant, people like my good friend Stan Crump, people like Unique Mackey. Some of these names you might not know. And that's kind of the point, right? These aren't athletes and actors and all that. Well, maybe athletes to some degree. But I think that we are positioned, we're poised to make change and we're doing it. And I think we are uniquely equipped and positioned to make changes like worldwide. I think we're able to connect with anyone. I think that we know what adversity is, we know what perseverance is. And I think most importantly, we know what love and connection is. And so I think if you're able to connect with people, if you're able to have relationship, then you're in a position to influence. And what that influence is really is a matter of kind of what you're bringing from your heart, right? So my perspective is that if things are going to be better, if we're going to have impact, we're going to lead the way in that.
Okay.
Period.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we can't wait for someone to do for us what we can do for ourselves. And I think that
Yeah.
is important. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, we have to lead the way
Yeah.
in change that we want to see. And as you mentioned, highlight some of those individuals that are doing the work. Because at times,
Mhm.
what happens, we hear about those who are not doing the work, and the ones that are doing the work at times get overlooked, which
Yeah.
can help to inspire others to do their part in creating the change. And that helps to change the perspective of us because once you can see people and hear about those who are doing it, will inspire you to do your part in
That's right.
helping to change the narrative. What change do you want to see in general and amongst Black men?
I think that it's important for us to know who we are individually and collectively, to know that the power that we have, to know the value that we have, and to believe that things can be different, because it's easy to get pessimistic. It's easy to feel tired and say, hey, nothing will ever change. But just that mindset, it really it drains you of your energy, right? And so I think for us individually and collectively to believe and know that things can be different. And as I said, to be the people who begin to lead the changes that we believe need to be made to have the impact we're trying to have.
And I appreciate that because we have to take the lead. We have to go there and do the work and be willing to do the work. But with all that, what about those who may think that, yes, we can do the work, but all they do, as you mentioned, maybe see the negative or are thinking about what can't happen? How would you talk to or share something with those people who have the doubt, have the idea of want to make a difference, but with all the things that they see around them,
Mhm.
how would you help those people to see that they can still make a difference?
Yeah, that can be a tough one, right? But I think we have to zoom out a bit and look at the big picture. Look at where we've come from and to where we sit today. Because when you're in directly engaged in battle, so to speak, if you're face to face with something and you're looking at it every day, it feels like this is the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. One of those, both of those probably are not true. If we zoom out, then we can see, okay, today this feels difficult. This is the challenge, but we're not starting from zero. Right? Where were my parents? Where were my grandparents? I mean, I think we got to be thinking on that. We got to be thinking generationally about having impact, because sometimes you plant seeds but you personally never see the fruit of what you planted. And so what we're doing now is we're kind of standing on the shoulders and standing on the work done of people, family, what have you, generations before us. And so I would simply say, as I said earlier, it takes what it takes, right? But whatever the time is, but it requires that we be committed to staying the course, even when it feels like you're making no difference, even if it feels like you can't see the progress. Progress is being made. So and I would also say, having gratitude is really important. I think it changes how you see things. And so getting in the practice of every day just thinking of a few things, 3 things, 5 things, whatever, as long as you're doing it consistently, that you appreciate about that day. It could be something as simple as, oh, what, that new soap I got, that smelled great. I love that. It could be as simple as accomplishing a small goal, but finding something, there's always something to be grateful for, something to appreciate, not just during the end of November, but every single day.
And I think that's a great reminder, especially when we're talking about making a difference. Because as you mentioned, it's not going to look like you're making progress every time. And we
Mhm.
need to appreciate that someone before us have paved the way. So we are all here standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's something that we need to appreciate because we don't have to deal with some of the same things that those before us have to deal with. And
That's right.
that is also something that we can be grateful for and be willing to trust the process when
That's
we
right.
decide to make a difference because sometimes it takes longer and you may not
That's right.
see the difference that you want to make in that time frame that you think it should. So
Yeah.
that's a great reminder for all of us that decide to make a difference in the world. What was a pivotal moment in your life?
I think probably one of the more pivotal moments in my life was when I realized that being myself was the path to my purpose, was going to be enough to propel me where I wanted to go. My first assignment was at Walter Reed Army Medical Center back in the 90s. And I came in, I thought wounded a bit because we just come from this big evaluation process that you have before you go into the Army as an officer. And I thought my performance was excellent, but my rating was average. And I felt like I didn't get what I deserved. And another dude who was more of a what we call a spotlight type guy, he got a maximum rating even though he didn't work as hard. And so I was salty about that. I get to Walter Reed after about a year, the a position opened up, aide de camp, which is basically the executive assistant, not secretary necessarily so much as almost handler, right hand of the hospital commander. That position opened up because the commander got promoted to general. My supervisor at the time said I should interview for that job. So three people interviewed for the job. I got that job, and the other gentleman, the other young man who came to Wall Street with me, who was I thought gifted that evaluation back in the day, he interviewed and he did not get the job. About a year after I was in that position, I found the documentation, all of the interview paperwork, the applications, and he went in really hard for that job. And so I asked the general at that time, why did you pick me? And he said, it's because I felt like you were genuine and we could have a real relationship. And in this role that you're having, traveling everywhere with me, being with me constantly, that's really important. And so to me, that said, like, because I went in there as myself, right? No smoke, no mirrors, no song and dance. I was just me. Not only was it enough, it was preferred to do something that was really important. And that job was amazing, by the way. I met all kind of people, chairmen of the Joint Chiefs and senators and congressmen and presidents and celebrities, all kind of stuff. But my primary role was to take care of one individual and make sure that he had what he needed. And I was personally selected for that task. So I'm like, wow, you know what? I think being me might work, and I've been me ever since. Not everybody loves that, but I can't help.
That's a great point right there. And it's something that is worth thinking about because sometimes we may think that we need to go and show everything that we may not be able to live up to, not realizing that what we need to do is to go and present who we are in
Mhm.
spaces. Sometimes, we say, man, we're going to do this, we're going to paint this picture, but that's not who we really are for
Yeah.
some positions or some jobs and stuff like that. Because we want the person to see us in a certain light, not
Yeah.
knowing that the most important thing to do is to be yourself. And I think that's a great point and a great perspective to think about as we go forward, because we're thinking about making a difference. We're thinking about moving the needle forward and sometimes even to make the connections with the right people because people are looking and listening and what we present at times may not so much who we are really, but just that genuineness that will help you to connect with the right people because we never know what people are looking for. But when you are yourself, it's best if they choose you or even don't choose you based on you being you. And I think that is a valid point for all of us that's listening as we go on this journey to make a difference. Our next question that I want to ask you is what life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
This response may scare some people, but I think it's important. And I think that is the humility and vulnerability are strengths that open doors that will propel you forward. We're all trying to figure out what do we give to the world, to the marketplace, or what have you, that it doesn't have already. What's unique about me? What's unique about this business? And really it is you, right? And so being able to share things about yourself, being able to talk about your failure, not from a place of shame or embarrassment, but from a place of learning and growth. I think those are the things that connect you with people in ways that they're not used to necessarily. They're used to people coming and putting on the front and putting on the facade, the best face. This is how I made it. Here are my 5 tips for success. Well, who talks about how they failed? Who talks about all of the adversity, all of the losses and the wins, right? And what they learn from those losses. I think that vulnerability opens doors because people immediately connect with that. They can't connect with the facade, right? They'll nod and clap, but that vulnerability, they're like, wow, this person, they get me. And so I think that ironically enough, that is the thing I think that will help to move you forward.
And the vulnerability have been coming up a lot in the conversation. And I think it's because, especially when it comes to that thing that we learn late in life, because as men, we have been taught to be tough, to put on this face despite what's
Yeah,
going on, despite our failures, despite our challenges. No one needs to know what we are dealing with.
that's
And
right.
as you said, can even prevent opportunities because you want to show that humanness, that human side of who you are. And that can be what open doors and make the connections with the right people. So I
Right.
really appreciate that vulnerability and humility as we go forward in this journey to make that impact that we are here to make in the world. So I
Yes,
really
sir.
appreciate that. But before I ask my final question, I want to ask you, where can the listeners find you and help support your work that you're doing currently to serve others?
Yeah, thanks for that. Couple of places I think. Our company website is www.connectmovegrow.com. And so you can kind of see what we're about right in our domain, right? www.connectmovegrow.com. And that kind of gives a general idea about of what our company Catalyst is about. But also, I would love for people to join us on the Marriage Shop, and that is the Marriage Shop on Facebook. It's also at the Marriage Shop on YouTube, and that's just about. And we're actually completing a website update, and we'll put that out soon. But that's really about helping to strengthen relationships. It's on every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And so we would love for folks to join us there. And all of the videos are archived on YouTube, and you can go back probably a couple of years, 3 years on Facebook as well. If folks want to kind of check out what that content is about. And the last thing is this unity movement. The website is www.unity706.com. And we expect that movement to really kind of, it's already spilled out of the area. We expect it to continue to grow across the nation. And so we'll continue to grow that every year. So just kind of keep an eye on what's going on there. Unity706.com is the site. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram at Unity706. So we'd love for folks to check those out.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And I will insert, a link in the comment area where individuals can continue to click on and connect with you and the work that you are doing. So they will have that information to look up.
Sure.
So
Yes, sir. I appreciate that.
no problem, no problem. And the work that you're doing is important, and especially with the marriage counseling type, not really counseling, but it share the insights and how we can
Yeah.
have better relationships. As you mentioned earlier in the conversation, relationships really, especially with our spouses and stuff like that, help us to grow and to be able to be the best version of ourselves. And if we're going to make an impact or a great impact, we need to have that type of relationship working. So I know the listeners will really appreciate that insight because one thing they talk about, especially when it comes to Black men, we may not be doing well in that area. So hearing
Hmm.
from someone who have done it and be in that type of committed relationship for a long time can really shed light on some of the things that needs to be done to make sure everyone can have their success in the relationship. So that's
Absolutely.
definitely important.
Thank
So,
you.
but yes, yes, yes. So let me ask my final question. What impact do you want to have on the world?
It's such a simple question, and so deep, and complex. I think I simply want anyone who comes in contact with me. I want there to be perhaps some difference that I made in their life, not because I did anything huge or special, but simply because there was a shift. Because I showed them compassion, I showed them love, I showed them respect, and because of that, they were able to somehow extend that to somebody else. If I simply do that with everyone I've come in contact with, then that will have that generational impact that I mentioned. I'll never see it, but I don't have to see it. My job at some point is just to plant seeds. So that's I'm just trying to plant good seed.
Man, and that's great. So each individual can learn from you by example. So you live it, and others can see through how you live, how they too can live their life. And being an example is always a great way to make a difference. So that's a great way to inspire positive change. So, Dr. Perry, man, it's great having you here on the Black Male Impact. The insights, they were great. The perspective help us to think about our own lives. And that's really appreciative. And thanks again for being here on the Black Male Impact.
Hey, thank you for having me. And I just all the best to you as you continue on your journey. And just praying that you have the profound impact that I know you'll have. And so thank you very much.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. So we'll be in touch, man. And let's continue to make a difference in the world.